Oh, hello there. Well, welcome back to my channel. My name is Aaronica B. Cole, and I am a plus size sewing influencer, as well as content creator, pattern designer, as well as your resident stylish fashionista who really centers the plus size body in everything that I do. And welcome to today's content where we are going to be dispelling 10 popular sewing myths within, of course, the sewing community that could be holding you back. And listen, you're going to want to stay around for number 10 because it will truly be freeing. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get into it. And we're going to go ahead and start off with number 1. And I say this very loosely because, of course, I'm sitting here with my Bernina baddie as I say this. But the first myth that we're going to be busting is that in order to sew, that you have to have a really expensive sewing machine. This is completely false, friends. You do not have to pay an arm and a leg for a sewing machine, especially to just get started. The best sewing machine that you can absolutely have is going to be the one that fits within your budget and does not cause you to break the bank because, baby, we still have to buy patterns, fabrics, notions, and other things. Do not spend all that money on a sewing machine. And actually, before I continue, y'all, listen. The squeaking in the background is obviously the puppy playing with his toy. So hold please while I go and close this door. Okay? The truth of the matter is that any sewing machine with a bare minimum of 2 stitches, yes, that's all we really need is 2 stitches. And that is going to be your straight stitch and your zigzag stitch is really going to help you to create the beautiful garments that you're going to feel like are actually adorning your body. Sorry, puppy again. Versus feeling like in order for you to actually have something that will work and help you to make the garments of your dreams, that you actually need to be spending multiple thousands of dollars. Completely false. Let's go ahead and get into myth number 2. Okay, so myth number 2 may or may not be my favorite myth of all. Why? Because it is really telling us that you have to follow the patterns exactly as they are put together and following that tutorial. Now, listen, if you have ever taken a class with me, one thing that we are not going to do is follow that tutorial. Also, pattern pieces are just suggestions. That's it. You do not have to read that pattern, follow that tutorial to a T in order to make a garment. First of all, as a pattern designer, one of my favorite things is to see people actually go ahead and hack the pattern and really utilize it to allow their own creativity come forward. Do I love people putting together the pattern as I designed it? Sure. But also, I love the freedom that we get when it comes time for us to go ahead and use our own imaginations and really decide what it is that we want to create with this here pattern. Pattern hacking is a thing for a reason, friends, and it's going to stay around for a long time. So do not feel like that pattern is actually limiting your creativity. Just use that pattern as your as just like your stepping point for really taking that pattern to the next level for it to become the pattern of your dreams, the garment of your dreams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that number 2 out the door. We do not have to stick to the pattern tutorial or those pattern pieces and what they are actually being used for. Okay, so now myth number 3 is, I'm not gonna lie, it is a love-hate relationship for me. But the notion that pins will ruin your fabric, that's a myth. It's not true. I don't love using pins because one thing about pins and me is as soon as I take them out, I am likely going to go ahead and prick my finger. And for me, that is just not what I want in this here life. Okay. Now, will they leave tiny holes, things like that? What I will say is that make sure that you're using nice, sharp pins, as well as the pin style that is going along with the fabric that you're using. If you plan on using a fine, delicate fabric, use a nice, thin, sharp pin, and you won't have that issue. You can absolutely use pins to pin together your projects and not have to worry about them leaving holes. And that is coming from someone who does not love to use pins, okay? Now, myth number 4 might get me in trouble with some of y'all because I have seen some of those comments that say, well, I don't do that. Here's the myth. Pre-washing your fabric is optional. Now, before you guys come for me, go ahead and check out this video that I put together that talks about why it is that you should go ahead and pre-wash your fabrics. Because here's the truth of the matter. Pre-washing your fabrics will cause that shrinkage to happen before you go ahead and cut your fabric. There is nothing worse than making a garment from a fabric that you did not pre-wash and then have that baby shrink after that first wash, after you already got that perfect fit. Do not let that be you. Don't let that happen to you, okay? Because you deserve better. And it's not just with woven fabrics that shrink. If you are buying some cotton based fabrics, a lot of times those will shrink as well. The percentage of shrinking will depend upon the fabric content as well as how it's made. Typically, we can see anywhere from 5% on up to 10% as far as the yardage shrinking. So, yeah, do with that what you will. Also, dyes are used for fabrics. We want to pre-wash, get rid of some of that nastiness. And if you have ever been out to the fabric swap meets where you see those fabrics laying on the ground, is that what you're putting on your body? Friend, you deserve better. Okay. So that notion that pre-washing your fabrics is a choice, babe, it's not. Go ahead, pre-wash some fabrics. Okay. Stop playing with yourself. Myth number 5 is another one that I have a love-hate relationship with, and that is that you need a serger in order to sew knits. You don't. Now, will using a serger make sewing those knits a lot easier? Absolutely, they surely will. But there are still some things that I will use my handy dandy Brenda, and we all know that Brenda is my sewing machine, my B590, that I will use her for, right? So if I'm sewing lingerie or bras and panties, we're definitely still sewing those knits up on this here sewing machine. There is always going to be something that you need your sewing machine for. In fact, I was actually teaching a class that was about knits and we're working with knit fabrics in the class. And she was like, oh, so I don't need a sewing machine. Baby, you always need a sewing machine. Okay. Brenda or sewing machines are always going to be your bestie. Always need them. They can easily sew through your knit fabrics. You're going to have to break out either that lightning stitch, which on the Bernina is stitch number 11, but it's the one that looks like literally a lightning rod. That's going to appear to be a straight line, but it's definitely going to be your zigzag stitch. Or just use one of the other 2 zigzag stitch options, the one that has the stitch, each stitch is the direction of the zigzag, or you can do the one that breaks it up. Those will get you what you need as far as sewing with knit fabrics. Now, if you are committed to being a knit fabric baddie like myself, then going ahead and investing in a serger is going to definitely be a game changer for you, but it is not necessary in order for you to sew knits, okay? So yeah, myth busted. Boom. Here's another good myth that we're just going to send on out the door. That if you have more tension on your machine, then that's going to equate to stronger stitches. False. Using the wrong tension for your fabric is going to lead to having like different bumps and it's going to look not good, and it can actually cause your stitches to pop. Let's say, for example, going back to the previous myth, that we decide to use high tension with that stretch knit fabric, and you go ahead and you put that on, babe, them stitches are just going to be snap, crackle, popping just like Rice Krispies, okay? That's not what you want. Your tension should always match the weight of your fabric. And a lot of times we do actually have to shift that. Sometimes it does cause for greater tension, and sometimes it causes for looser tension. We see that working with a serger as well. Either way, you're going to want to make sure that you adjust your tension to meet what your fabric needs are requiring. Stronger does not always equal better, okay? Myth number 7 is that you can't sew thick fabrics on your basic home sewing machine. False. You absolutely can. On this here sewing machine, when I put in a denim needle, I can sew through about 6 layers of denim without a problem. In whatever sewing machine that you decide to use, you need to make sure that you're utilizing the needle that matches the weight of the fabric. That's the reason why there are so many different types of needles out there. I did actually have someone confess to me that they never changed their needle and that they just use the same needle. It doesn't matter the fabric. Sure, yeah, you can get away with that. But when you're talking about doing things like leathers, when you're talking about doing things like denims, those sorts of thicker fabrics, it's going to be more prudent for you to go ahead and change to that denim needle or that leather needle, because those needles have been formulated and designed to go up against those thicker fabrics, which is what you're going to need in order to make it through multiple layers. When we talk about making jeans or using denim, we're not just going to be over here with one layer. We're going to have multiple layers. Like I'm getting ready to use denim for one of my patterns, my Emmy, I think it's 25th 15, where I have the pleated pant. When I do those pleats, I'm going to have multiple layers of denim on top of each other. So that means that my machine is going to have to go through it. So using something like a denim needle is going to make that easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. It's going to go through, cut through there like butter. Okay. So the notion that I can't do that on this here home sewing machine, completely false. And I understand that I have a Bernina. Behind this Bernina, I actually have a Burnett B77. I've also done denim on that machine using my denim needles. Change your needles, friends. They are going to help you out more than you would imagine. So myth number 8 is that hand sewing is weaker than machine sewing. Babe, false. False. Now, will you ever catch me out here hand sewing like an entire dress or pants or anything like that? I'm going to go with probably not, but it's not because I think that it's weaker. It's simply because it takes longer, and why hand sew when I have machines? I digress, okay? But remember that hand sewing was before machine sewing. And so the garments that people were wearing were done by hand sewing, and those things stayed together. And in fact, we can actually look up hand sewn garments in museums and see that they are still together. If they are falling apart, it is simply because of the elements hitting them, not because of that weak stitch. Now, when we talk about fast fashion and them stitches that are done on machines, we are going to do that today. We'll have a whole other video that's dedicated to that. But we know that machine stitches are excellent. Hand stitches are also excellent. When we look at hand embroidery, those stitches are in there, and that is all done by hand, okay? So the notion that you have to only machine sew in order to get a solid stitch, completely false. Let's stop playing with our hands. Okay? Here is number 9, and that myth is that sewing garments is too hard for beginners. Cut it out. Cut it out. Okay, listen. What is that song? Anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you. And that's not just for like the men versus women argument, but that is literally, if you are committed to learning how to sew garments as a beginner, you can absolutely sew a garment. Just like you can do anything that is above this quote unquote beginner level if you put your mind to it. I teach locally, and I will have people who are taking my advanced classes, and they'll be like, yeah, I've only made a tote, or I've only made like a basic shirt. Yeah, come on into this class. And here's the reason why, because like I feel like just because this might be in my head an intermediate or an advanced pattern, why should my limits limit your action, right? I don't know how dedicated you are. And we know that if you put your mind to something, and depending upon who you are as a person, nothing will stop you. So why should we make pretend that, doing garments or even sewing is not beginner friendly when it is? Dare to have the courage and the boldness to be bad at something until you get good at it. The only way that we can become better is by simply being a beginner and consistently practicing. There is no specific roadmap in order to become a great sewist or anything like that. It's going to be different for everybody because we all are dedicated to different things. And we all know that, listen, just because for me, it might take longer to wrap my head around, say, doing something like zippers, doesn't mean the same thing is for you. Let's stop putting our limitations on other people and letting that be what determines whether or not someone is ready to do something. So that myth, completely false, okay? Now listen, I'm happy that you stuck around for myth number 10 because we're busting this. Now, this was actually a myth that I had to bust for myself, and that is that pressing your seams is unnecessary. It's not. Babe, press some seams, okay? And this is coming from your anti-pressing auntie, okay? I do not like pressing. It's not something that I hide behind. It is not something that I make pretend is not the truth. I don't love pressing, okay? But when I press out that seam, especially for a hem, and I see the difference between what could have been versus what is, y'all, you better go ahead and get that hot metal and put it on that seam. The other truth of the matter is that when we press these seams, not only does it visually make a difference to us, but it also helps to lock that fabric and lock that seam in place, right? We know that when we steam things, it presses out the wrinkles and things like that. But also, when we are locking in and allowing that fabric and that seam to be locked into place, we do that with the iron. Also, when we're doing different types of finishes, so for example, like a French seam, when you do that initial stitch, you're going to have to press it to make sure that when you flip the right side facing each other to get that final seam, you're going to have to press that together in order to make sure that everything is correct, right? Because if you don't, then you run the risk of having your first seam being shown. That's not what we want. Also, when we talk about doing things like Hong Kong bias and stuff like that, we got to press those seams in order to make sure that they are pressed out and that bias is going in there the right way. So you are going to have to press your seams. That is a necessary step, okay? Also with knit fabrics, and I will often say that I don't press my seams as I go, and I don't. But at the end, when that garment is completed, you will need to press your seams, and it's going to affect the finish. It's going to affect the way that it looks at the end of the garment, right? And for those who say, well, I don't actually press or I don't actually like iron my knit fabrics, that's okay. That's fine. Press it in the beginning. You'll be okay. All right? I promise it will make a difference. All right, baddies, it's your turn. You tell me, did you believe any of these myths that I just finished debunking? Let me know in the comments. And if this is something that really resonated with you, make sure that you've gone ahead and subscribed, like, commented, and share this with someone else who might need to have some of these myths debunked for themselves. Until next time, happy sewing.